Hi, I'm Old Norse specialist Dr. Jackson Crawford, and today I want to talk to you about the famous Shieldmaiden, or Shieldmaiden Hervor, from the Saga of Hervor and Heidrek. And if this hat stays on my head through the whole video in this wild Wyoming wind, I'm going to ask Resistol to sponsor me. As many of you who follow this channel know, I am working on my translation of the Saga of Hervor and Heidrek, together with the Saga of Rolf Kraki, to be published as my third book in probably early 2020 by Hackett Publishing Company, following on the heels of my translation of the Poetic Edda and the Saga of the Volsungs. Now, Hervor, in the title of the Saga of Hervor and Heidrek, is a shield maiden, perhaps the most famous, or she should be the most famous, of the shield maidens in Old Norse sagas. Hervor is a really interesting character. So she is the daughter of a berserker named Angantyr. Angantyr and his 11 brothers, they're all berserker, end up fighting the famous hero Orvar Odr, Arrow Odd, and his friend Hjalmar on the island of Samsøy, which is associated with magic in a lot of Old Norse literature. This is the modern Danish island of Samsøy. And Angantyr and his brothers are all killed, and they are buried on the island by Odr. They make an agreement about this before their battle. And Angantyr is buried with his famous cursed sword, Tyrfing. Now, the name of that sword is often supposed by people today to mean finger of Tyr, but in fact that Y is short, so this is not the finger of Tyr. In fact, the name of the sword is probably either associated with a Gothic tribe, remembered in Latin as the Tyrfing, or it could possibly be related to the word turf, so it's something like the one from the turf, because Hervor comes and gets it out of his burial mound. At any rate, Hervor grows up with her mother's father, the Jarl Bjarmar. It's interesting that in a saga that has a female warrior hero, her mother is never named. And we read this about the young Hervor, drawing from my to-be-published translation. Bjarmar's daughter was pregnant and gave birth to an especially beautiful girl. She was sprinkled with water and given a name and called Hervor. She grew up with the Jarl and was as strong as men are, and when she came of age, she was more interested in archery and swords and shields than in weaving or tapestries. And she more often did evil than good, and when she was banned from doing this, she went into the forests and killed men for their money. Now, her maternal grandfather, the Jarl Bjarmar, wants to keep from her the truth of her father, Angantyr the Berserker. But when she finds out about it, she binds up her hair, disguises her long flowing hair, puts on a man's clothes, and goes under the name Hervor into the company of some Vikings to the island of Samsøy. Once she is there, she has an exchange with the sheep herder who lives there. Is the hat going to stay on? Staying. And he warns her not to go to these burial mounds where her father and her uncles are, because they are haunted by their undead presences. And none of her men will go with her. In fact, they all sail away and leave her behind. But she breaks into her father's burial mound, and her exchange with him is known as the poem The Waking of Angantyr, or Hervor. Now, I did a video about a year ago in which I already read my entire translation of this poem, but I'll give you a taste of it. Here is Angantyr talking to Hervor, his daughter. Of course, remember, he's undead. He's a zombie, or aftergangen. Hell's Gate draws up. Hell's Gate draws up. The grave mounds open. Everything is in flame on the island around. It's an evil sight to look out of the grave. Hurry back, young lady. Go back to your ships. But she answers, you can't burn those flames so bright at night that the fires will terrify me. This woman's heart will never tremble, even if she sees a ghost stand before this door. So after this long exchange, captured in the fascinating poem Hervor, or The Waking of Angantyr, he does finally give her the sword. And since her crew have abandoned her, she hitchhikes, ships to the land of Glassesfeller, where she takes up service with the ruler Guthmundur, and ends up being his chess advisor of all things. Now, the sword Tyrfing has a curse upon it, or feature depending on your perspective, that whenever it is drawn, it must kill someone before it can go back into its scabbard. So one day, while Hervor, of course still disguised as Hervor the Man, is giving some chess advice to Guðmundur over his shoulder, another man draws the sword out of the scabbard without permission, and Hervor is forced, of course, to kill him before she can sheath the sword again, and then she flees. And Guðmundur has an interesting comment right after this. He says to his men who want to go follow, quote-unquote, Hervor and kill, quote-unquote, him, Verið kyrir, ekki mun svo mikil hefn í manninum sem þeir allir, því að þeir vitið ekki hver hann mun þessi kvenmaður yður dýrkeyptur, áður þeir fóið hans líf. Be calm. There is not as much to avenge on that individual as you believe, because you don't know who he is. But that woman-man would cost you a good deal before you took his life. The use of the word kvenmaður, which I'm translating here as woman-man, is interesting, because you can just use that to mean man. The word mother in Old Norse, often translated man, can apply to a person of either gender. It's truly gender neutral, even though it is masculine and grammatical gender. So kvenmaður, using that prefix, not prefix, but this other root kven, making a compound of it that's like woman-man, is really more like woman-person. But here, his intention truly does seem to be to kind of make this like a blend of woman and man, and emphasize her sort of, her defiance of gender expectations. So then Hervor goes out raiding for a long time. All right, I guess Resistol's not going to get the sponsorship, or I'm not going to get the sponsorship. She goes out raiding for a long time. We're told she was very often victorious, but when she grew tired of this, she went home to the Jarl, her mother's father, and then she went about like other young women and occupied herself with sewing and tapestries. Now, eventually she does marry. She's considered apparently a great match. She marries the man Hovundur, and they have 2 children. They have Angantyr, named after her father, and then they have another son named Heidrek, who is going to be the Heidrek of the Saga's title, and become a wise king in his own right once he's an adult. One thing that's kind of fun is that we have the typical Saga duality between a brother who is kind of ugly, often dark-haired, and a bit of an introvert, kind of a jerk, versus a blonde, popular, happy guy, and that's Angantyr, and then the jerk is Heidrek. But we are told that as much good as Angantyr did, Heidrek did still more evil. Hervor loved him dearly. So Hervor is a really fascinating character. She is a warrior woman who also comes back and then lives as a noble woman in typical Saga fashion. She mothers sons. She later passes on the great sword Tyrfing to her beloved, more evil son Heidrek after he kills his brother accidentally and is banished from the kingdom by his father. And then he, in turn, will have a daughter named Hervor, who will be a shieldmaiden in the end of the Saga of Hervor and Heidrek, in the part of the saga that is narrated by the poem called The Battle of Goths and Huns, or The War of the Goths and Huns, which I've also made another video about, in which I read that in its entirety. One quick trivia fact, Hervor herself, the first one, is never directly called by the word skaldmad or skaldmoi, shieldmaiden, even though she's the prime example of it, but her granddaughter Hervor is one time. Alright, well, these videos, which are made in beautiful places in my Rocky Mountain homeland of Colorado and Wyoming, are free of charge, but if you want to help me continue to make these, they are supported by generous Patreon donations. Many of my kind Patreon supporters are thanked at the end of this video. I've also translated, as I mentioned at the beginning, the Poetic Edda and the Saga of the Volsungs, and my translation of the Saga of Hervor and Heidrek will be available relatively soon, followed by my translation of the Prose Edda. For now, from beautiful, windy Wyoming, I'm wishing you all... Hey, it lasted 10 minutes.